Hi, everybody. My name is Bob Goodwin, and welcome to another episode of LinkedIn Live with Career Club. If you're not familiar with Career Club, we're using proven sales methods and tools to help people find careers that matter to them. If you're feeling stuck in your current role or stuck in a job transition, we'd love to help you. So you're welcome again to check us out at career.club. Also, would love if you connected with me here on LinkedIn, as well as follow Career Club page. We're always posting content and keeps you up to date on events like we're having today with our guest, Roger Howell, which we'll get to in just a minute. Next is, this is a live event. So if you happen to be joining us live, please feel free to let us know that you're on the call. If you have any comments or questions, we'd love to address those as we have time. So please do that. And then lastly, I want to say thank you to my colleague, Heather Zinzer. She is the brains behind the operation here. So Heather, thanks for once again making one of these calls happen. So I'd like to introduce our guest today. It's Roger Howell. Roger is the president of City Gospel Mission here in Cincinnati, Ohio. And City Gospel is one of the largest and best recognized missions in the United States. And we're going to talk with Roger today about nonprofits. Often when I'm having conversations with our clients who are thinking about what might be next for them in their career, it's not uncommon at all for nonprofits to come up as an area of interest for people. And so we thought, who better than Roger Howell, who's been doing this for 40 years, to come and share his expertise and maybe give you some advice as to whether this might be a great option for you. So with that, Roger, welcome.
Well, thanks so much, Bob, for having me. I'm looking forward to it.
Yeah, and so, just to say something very sincerely to you, I have just tons of respect for you, Rogers. We've gotten to know each other, for probably a decade now, and the work that you guys do at City Gospel, and then for your leadership in particular. So it's a real privilege for me to have you on today. So thank you.
Thank you. Thanks for your kind words.
Yep. So to help our audience get to know you a little bit, one of our little traditions is what we call Rock's Fab Five of an icebreaker. So just to help the audience get to know you a little bit better, where were you born and raised?
I lived in a rural community outside of Lansing, Michigan. So.
Awesome. And then how long have you been, and how did you find your way to Cincinnati?
Oh, that is a long, funny story, but a person recruited me to come down here. I said I'd come for 1 year until I figured out what I wanted to do for the rest of my life, and loved it here. So stayed ever since. I was in 79.
Jeez.
79. So.
Life does take strange twists.
Yes,
and where'd you go to school, Roger?
I went to Bethel College in St. Paul, Minnesota.
Oh, so you are definitely a Midwesterner.
I am. Yeah.
And then just a little bit about your family.
Married for 40 years in a couple of weeks. Will be our 40th anniversary. Have 4 kids, all adult kids now, and one on the East Coast, one on the West Coast. But praise God, 2 of them have moved back. So I got 2 in the area. So.
Congratulations. That's awesome. And then I know we'll get into this a little bit more in the regular part of the discussion, but maybe just briefly a little bit about your career and just how you ended up at City Gospel.
Well, I went to, I went to college with the thought that I would be a pastor. So that's what I prepared for in my undergraduate. And, I've got a minor in Greek and a lot of Bible classes and different things like that. And literally a month before I was to go to seminary, I clearly heard from God that I was not supposed to do that. And then I was lost. No clue what to do. I was living in my parents' basement, who I love, and working at a person who put me through college. So because he wanted me to be a pastor, and I was sort of lost. And then my youth pastor spent that year recruiting me to come to Cincinnati with him to do work with urban youth. And Bob, I told him, there's no way I'm moving to a big city. I'm a country boy. There is no way I'm raising money, and there's no way I'm working with kids. And after a year, I said, hey, I don't know what I'm going to do, but I don't like living in my parents' basement. I'll move to Cincinnati for 1 year. And that was 1979, and moved here and loved the city, loved working with kids, and have tolerated raising money.
Awesome. And we'll talk about that in a minute, I'm sure. And then quickly, when we don't find you at City Gospel, what do you like to do outside of work?
I love all sports. I actually like playing sports more than I do watching, but I do watch. Playing a lot of golf now, do a lot of outdoor stuff. We love to travel, but of course, spending time with my kids. Most of our travel now is to visit a kid or a grandkid. So
there you go. And don't you have a bicycle that you might spend a little bit of time on?
I do. Had a foot injury, so I haven't been doing that as much. But yeah, I will get back to it soon.
No, I know you love your bike. So let's jump into, thank you, that was great. So let's jump into the meat of the conversation.
Okay.
For those who aren't familiar, what is the mission of City Gospel Mission? What do you guys do?
Our mission is to help people get out of poverty. So our mission is breaking the cycle of poverty one life at a time. So we work with homeless, we work with folks with addiction issues, we help people without jobs getting jobs, and then we work at risk youth so they don't have to get into one of our adult programs.
This is a little on the fly, but as you think about sort of I don't know what the right number is, but kind of causal factors of poverty, or you talk about breaking the cycle of poverty, what do you see some of those levers as being? What have you learned over the years?
Oh, wow. That is a complicated question. Generally, people try to make everything so simple. Like they say poverty is because somebody doesn't have education, or poverty is because they don't have things, or poverty is because the system has made them poor. Or, some people say, in my world, a lot of people say it's because they don't have God. Well, none of those is true by itself. A lot of people, it's a combination of those things. For me, I like to break it down in broken relationships. People in poverty have broken relationships that tend to keep them wounded or not heading in the right direction. So that's how I like to say it.
Well, you just did something that is one of the things I really love the most about you, which is you're very plain spoken. And, it's like, yeah, it's easy to kind of pin it on one thing or pin it on the other. I used to work for a man that said, every complicated problem has a simple solution, ... and it's wrong. So if it was easy, it would have been figured out already. And, I really resonate with what you're talking about with broken relationships, and, that these are people that we're talking about, right? They're not numbers, they're not statistics, they're not work producing units or whatever. These are real people with real issues. And I would concur with you, not that you need my affirmation, but it does seem to be, in my experience as well, that broken relationships leads to a host of other potentially unhealthy behaviors where the fruit of that becomes chronic poverty.
And the interesting thing is, as we all know, people that are wealthy have broken relationships, and people that are upper middle class and people that are middle class have. The difference is they often have, most of the time, they have a nice support system around it, whether that's a big bank account or somebody, who will help them. But the people in poverty have those broken relationships without that support.
Yep. Yeah, which just makes it a spider web to try and get out of.
Right.
So you've been at City Gospel for 40 years. I believe I read on the website that the ministry has grown tenfold in that time. What was the scope of the ministry, kind of when you got there, and what is it today?
Well, a lot of our growth is because of all of our mergers. We've had 9 official mergers and 1 wholly owned subsidiary that we're working on merger. So when I started, I was just working with urban youth. And wow, when I started back then, we're talking 40, 60, 100 youth at most in a year. And pre-COVID, we were working with over 3,500 youth, another 10,000 adults in our adult programs. But what has happened is when we've had mergers, we brought in programs that have similar missions, most of them a different scope of people they're working with. And then we've grown. We really have found that 1 + 1 = 3. And, when you add two organizations together, they take the positives of both, and it does multiply the sum. So,
well, it's always been one of the things that it has impressed me because, again, I think you bring a very practical sensibility to things. So you're talking about, acquisitions, a wholly owned subsidiary. Those are commercial terms, right? And you think about, sometimes in the nonprofit world, we lead with our heart, sometimes more than our head. And that you talked about raising money. And so when organizations that share a similar mission, but either are providing different services, addressing a different segment of society or whatever it is, and can reduce the overhead so that, more of the raised funds are going towards the actual ministry, not supporting the admin side of it, the overhead side of it, everybody wins.
Yeah, exactly. But more than that, what I have found is that when we have now, all of our mergers have been friendly mergers, and most of them are technically friendly acquisitions. But it's more than that. It's improving their processes, helping people think different. It's more than just reducing overhead. But yeah, that's important.
Well, I actually let's kind of build on that for half of a second, because in other podcasts, and this is more in an HR kind of a context, but we do talk about diversity of thought a lot.
Mm-hmm.
And when you've got different people who have different backgrounds, different experiences, different perspectives, it often yields a better result. And that sounds like that's part of what you've experienced.
Yes, definitely.
And what are the keys then to a smooth integration? Like, how do you keep egos at bay? I mean, back to we're all dealing with people and broken relationships and stuff.
Focus on the mission. That is the key. Now, most of our friendly acquisitions have been sort of one-person shops, and so that's been sort of easy to keep that person. And I'm going to stereotype and generalize, but most of the time, that person is so overwhelmed in administration and fundraising, and they're not any good at it, and they hate it. And so when somebody comes along and helps them, they're thrilled. And keeping them focused on the mission is pretty easy. It becomes more complicated, though, when it's a larger organization and there's more people and they're just that one. Those are difficult. In the end, they're always valuable, and they always, but it's much more difficult to get through. So the one-person shop is much easier to merge with.
One of the things that you had mentioned to me in a previous conversation was my job is getting people to work with other people.
Yeah.
Can you build on that thought? That's a really interesting one.
Yeah, I think a lot of people, especially from the business world, doing a second career or just leaving to come to the nonprofit world, they've had good experience with working somebody, and they think in the nonprofit world, they're just going to work with people. And maybe when I started 40 years ago, that was true, but it is not true anymore because it's just not effective and there's just not enough resources. So when we hire a staff, depending on exactly the role, but generally we hire that staff not to work with our clientele or the people in poverty. We hire that staff to motivate volunteers and get other people to do the direct work. And so a lot of times I'm telling people, hey, you're not coming to a nonprofit to help the poor person anymore. You're helping. You got to figure out a bigger system to help more people. So I'd like to explain that when I started, a good urban youth worker maybe worked with 50 people. Now I expect an urban youth worker to work with 200 or more people. And that is because their job is now getting others to do the direct ministry. So does that make sense, Bob?
No, it totally makes sense. And do you find that the person who thought maybe they were coming into the nonprofit to do the direct work can still find satisfaction until still scratch their why itch?
Yes. I mean, I think it's really important. I still work with people directly. I still think that's really important. But you have to be looking at the big picture that you're now working with 200 and maybe you only know 10 really well, or you're only doing direct relationship with 10. You have to keep it focused in on that mission. Our job is to help a group of people, just not one or two. Where the people come in to have problems is when they're trying to do nonprofit work because they're trying to fix and heal themselves. So many people that come in to apply for working in the helping field have issues themselves, and they want to really fix themselves by doing this work. Or in other words, feeling good because they're helping somebody else to salve their own wound. So if that is the issue, then probably we can't help them feel good because they don't get enough. They want to be right there. They want to fix somebody individually. Now, we all have issues. I still got wounds, right? But what are the levels of those are healed, and to what level is that impacting your direct work?
Yeah, I was going to say, I mean, at some level, is that actually a bad thing, right? Because there's a level of empathy and things like that. Is that hard for you to suss out in like an interviewing process?
It can be. And it sort of depends on which level of job they're coming into, how much woundedness they can have, I guess. But yeah, it can be very hard to, because sometimes it's totally covered up until 6 months down the road. And then you start figuring out, that this person's got more issues than they're helping. So.
Yeah. So you kind of started already kind of bridging into, again, I set the premise up here of having talked with a lot of our clients and just over the years, oftentimes when people get to a certain stage in their career, they're looking for something that drives more satisfaction for them, and as we get later and later in our career, we want to give back, maybe create legacy. Maybe we've got enough financial flexibility to be able to do something. So there's some different cohorts, I think, within this, but what business skills have you found, do you think, translate especially well into the nonprofit world? I know what one's going to be, but go ahead.
Well, I'm waiting to hear yours. I think I'll start that part of the discussion by saying my view is I run a business. And if you're not coming into the nonprofit world realizing you're in a business, you got a problem. This is a business. I have to run every aspect of a business that anybody else has to run to. And depending on your business, I might have 2 or 3 extra things. Mm-hmm. So if you're coming into a nonprofit thinking, it's going to be easy. And I've seen this from business people. I worked at so-and-so and I had millions of dollars of sales, and your nonprofit's nothing compared to that. And they get a rude awakening because it is a business, and it is a difficult business because of what you referred to earlier. We're not fixing a thing. We're not building a widget. We're working with people who make their own decisions. No matter how much good we might give them, they make their decisions. And, my staff hearts breaks every time one of the people that's gone through our recovery program ODs and dies. And that happens 2 or 3 times a year. And it just breaks your heart because when they left you, they were doing great. Um, so
But,
first of all, the answer is this is a business.
yep.
And so you need strong work ethic. You got to stick to it. You have dedication. You got to know accounting. You got to know HR. You got to know administration. You got to know how to manage people. All of those things.
Yeah. So and I will tell you my answer in a second, but I really like the setup though. And again, I think that really speaks to what I said earlier, the practical sensibility that you bring to this, which is this is a business. It might be a nonprofit, but it is a business in all the same elements. And as you said, plus a couple others probably, kind of layer in. But you mentioned like, the fundraising and stuff like that. I mean, there's no business without sales.
That's right.
I don't care what you're doing. There is no business without sales. There's no bottom line without a top line. And, the money part of it, particularly for the executive director of an organization, I mean, that is, if it's not job one, it's job two of like it needs to be solvent. Like, otherwise you can't do the good of the ministry without money. That's the oxygen that makes this organism breathe.
To me, and I often think about, there's so many businesses out there that parallel all the stuff I do, but then there's a lot of business that only do parts of it. But I have to sell to my donors for fundraising. I have to sell to my, what we call participants, so they figure out they want to be in our program. And I have to sell to my staff that they got to come here for a little bit less money. It just feels like I'm a salesperson all the time.
Oh, and I bet, and your board too.
Oh, exactly. Then I got a group of people, and I love my board. My board is the best in the city, but I'm going to say this. I got a group of people who are my boss, who don't know near as much about working with people as poverty as they think they do.
Yep.
Except
and never, and really can't.
Yeah, exactly. And I don't expect them to.
Right. Yeah. So interesting stuff. So what are the biggest surprises and or disappointments business people experience when they make the move to the nonprofit sector?
My experience is how hard it is. Mm-hmm. And they didn't accept it. They really thought there'd be a break from their business world. So I think that's that. I think too, especially if you come from a white middle class, I raised myself up by my bootstraps. I think you're shocked at how the folks that you're working with don't listen to you. It's like, or they might say they do. They're sitting there in a class and they hear everything you say and they're agreeing with it. And then that night something happens and they shut off which part of the brain do they shut off? They shut off the left part of their brain, and the right part of the brain takes over and does exactly what they said they wouldn't do that day. Mm-hmm. So yeah, I think that's a hard, because if you're somebody who thinks lack of education causes poverty, then your solution is just educating people. And when that doesn't help, it's just totally shocking.
Yeah. I think what I've seen, and I would love to hear you talk about this, back to broken relationships, is that working in a nonprofit isn't going to a birthday party every day and everybody's happy and we're having fun and it's cake and ice cream. It's like, wait a minute, she's difficult to deal with. That guy didn't do what he said he was going to do. Right. Hey, I'm not being hurt. Like whatever all those frustrations are that people have, that you're still dealing with imperfect people, just like you were at P&G or GE or wherever else it was you came from.
Exactly. And you now you got imperfect people that you're sort of your product, you're helping, but you also got imperfect people that you're sitting next to in your office.
That's what I mean, your colleagues. Yes.
Or, yeah. So it can be very difficult.
And I think maybe back on the money thing for a second, because again, sometimes, fundraising and all that sounds very crass and very, businessy. And I thought this was a nonprofit. Nonprofit doesn't equal non-money. Yes. Right. And I think sometimes it's like, wait, we talk about money a lot. How come we're not talking about the homeless? Because if we don't have any money, we can't help the homeless. Right. And I think that again, I'm giving an answer. I'd rather hear your opinion on just the surprise of like what a dominant role money plays at a nonprofit.
Yep. Yeah, it is. But you said we have to have money, and uh, and my staff is all screaming appropriately that they need more money to live on with inflation right now and all that. And I'm going, well, you can scream all you want for more money, and I'd love to give it to you, but our donors are saying they can't give it right now. So, it's not like
Yes.
I'm going and raising the cost of cheer in 2022.
Yep. On the flip side, though, because we kind of looked at maybe some of the negatives. What are some of the pleasant surprises that, like, where you've really seen somebody flourish, who's come from the commercial world, and it's like they just took to this. This was exactly what they needed to do at this stage of their life.
Yeah. I've got a full-time volunteer here. It's just great. He's retired, and he literally is here at least 40 hours a week. And it's just fun to see him use his skills and help people. And I got a board member that spends probably 20 hours a week here doing different things. So those are great. I've got a couple of retired P&G people that are on staff, and it's just, retired early, and it's just fun to see them really helping people and using their skills and their business experience to help people. But then, of course, when we see somebody that's really, had a difficult life and messed up, and when we see them thriving, you can't get any better thing than that.
So one element that I'd like to explore with you a little bit is, everybody's got their own passion thing that they care about, generally based on life experience. And a lot of times people are motivated to go start a nonprofit to go address that passion project for them. What are some bits of advice that you would give somebody who's considering starting a nonprofit?
Well, my first piece of advice is you need to go volunteer, because I guarantee there's somebody already doing something similar to that. You need to go be involved in that, volunteer in that, and learn what's going on. I hear a lot of people say, well, I want to work with people in poverty. And I say, well, come help us. Come work with us. No, I want to start my own thing. Well, okay, if you really feel like you're supposed to start your own thing, come learn. Because my experience is that when people have come to me and say they want to start a program, whatever, with people in poverty, I tell them some things. They go out and do what they wanted to do anyway. And if they survive, 10 years later, they're doing what I said that 10 years ago. Most of them don't survive. But so go learn, go work with it, see the difficulty, see why those people you see on the street are homeless, and somebody did try to help them. And all the services that are out there, because most of the time people don't know all the services that are out there. So they need to go learn about them. And most nonprofits, especially the larger ones, will say to you, there are plenty of people in poverty or whatever cause you're after. We need help. So you're not competition. Let's work together and try to figure out how to do that. Rather than just because what I see is most people look around and say, oh, there's a homeless person, there's somebody in poverty. Those organizations aren't really doing anything to help. I'm going to go do something to help. Mm-hmm. Well, you're not the savior. So come learn. Why are there still people out there that need help, even though there are 100 organizations in Cincinnati working with poor people?
Roger, when I was working downtown, that's how we kind of got extra connected. I would carry around a Xerox copy of all the places you can go eat in Cincinnati today for free. And, and just walking up and meeting, people that are holding their sign or whatever. And, we don't need another soup kitchen or a place handing out bologna sandwiches or whatever. That's not, another resource isn't needed. There's a different problem that's
Correct.
going on to get people connected. And so I appreciate what you're saying. And the other thing that's been my experience is that nonprofits, tend to play well with each other. Not always, but like, I'm involved with one in Dallas that's kind of a sister derivative of New York. Well, they just had somebody come in from Baltimore to get trained and to learn,
Right.
because they did have passion for the cause, but they wanted to, and maybe I'm getting over my skis a little bit, but humble themselves a little bit to say, hey, I could probably learn something first from people who've been doing this for 10 years before I just jump in and raise a bunch of money and do whatever.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. Nonprofits generally are very open to coming and learning. I mean, we have decided to stay a regional program, but if anybody outside that region wants to come, we'll give them all the resources we can to help them do their version of what they want to do in their city,
Yeah.
And that's been done for us. One of our largest youth programs came out of Denver. We flew up there 10 years ago, learned from them, and took the program back and tweaked what we wanted, and it's been super successful.
Yeah. So oftentimes not a need to reinvent the wheel that's out there. So that's for people that are thinking about starting their own thing. What about the person, and I think COVID has been, it's not I think it's just reality, it's been a hard reset for people on like, really, is this what I want to do for the rest of my career?
Right.
Or do I want to repurpose and do something that's more meaningful? The way sometimes I'll describe it, Roger, is before the pandemic, the frame was work and our life had to fit into that somehow. And now the frame is my life, and where does work fit into that? And so again, people getting more reflective, thinking about what's important to them, and saying, you know what, maybe I could go help sell more laundry detergent, or maybe I could go do this. What advice would you give somebody who's looking at leaving the corporate world and moving into the nonprofit world?
It is much more difficult than you think. It's not a party. It's not warm fuzzies all the time. And if you're really especially going to help people move forward in that person's life plan, there's a lot of confrontation, so that it's not that party aspect. So understanding that you can't fix people, right? Most nonprofits are working with people. You can't fix people. And so you have to come alongside them and help them in what they want to do and how they want to do it. And sometimes that's not what you want to do. And so it's not a panacea. It's not nirvana. That would be my first word to them. My second would be, please find an organization and help them. And I think there is a thought that if I'm coming out of business or I'm a senior leader at a business, I should be in control. I should run the nonprofit. In business, you didn't get to the top your first day. And nonprofits should be no different. You should be learning. And so if you're going to take that step to change careers, you got to realize you're changing careers, and you're not going to be the boss or not going to know everything. And I think that's one of the problems we have, is that so many people in business think they've got it all worked out. I raised myself up. I did it all myself. First of all, I don't think they really did it all themselves. But second of all, you're coming in a different career. You have to learn.
Well, you actually kind of touch on something that reminds me of some conversations I've had with people where people are pivoting. Like, I've been doing this for 26 years. I want to do something different now. And so their need is, I want to do something different, whatever different looks like. And, really counting the costs And how much of this are you running from something? And how much of this is you running to something?
Right.
Because if you're running from something, pretty quickly, you're going to find out, oh, this isn't a birthday party. Oops.
Yep.
Now I'm just in a new fire versus, and I think this is very true, but again, I want to hear you talk about this, is that when I'm running to something and this really does drive me and I feel called to go do this, I can put up with a lot of the other stuff. Those become little bumps in the road. They're not these mountains.
Right. Good point. No, you said that well. I would agree with that. And I really try to, when people comes to me about coming into nonprofit world, I really try to get them to think about, well, if you want to help people, what about the person in the cubicle next to you? Are you helping them now? What about your neighbor at home? And if you're not doing that now, I don't want you to come help me at the nonprofit because you're not really doing it.
Mhm.
You know, we're all around people everywhere, so you can help them wherever you're at. And just try to get people to start thinking about that you can help people, because we know so many people in the cubicles in the business world are messed up too.
Well,
So,
you mentioned earlier that, the broken relationships is not unique to any one social strata, which is very true.
Right.
And, I've often said that the real poverty out there is a poverty of hope. It's not an economic poverty as much as it's a poverty of hope. And you can have people that have the gilded front door and the cool car and the title and the job and the money, but they have broken relationships at home. And they're as poor as anybody who, in the vernacular, is flying a sign down in Fountain Square.
Yep, exactly.
They wearing different clothes, whatever, sleeping in a different place, but there's the same level of brokenness which gets to your well-made point. You can't fix people.
Mm-hmm.
You can help people,
right?
But we can't fix people. They have to want to repair themselves and be part of a bigger process. So, is there anything that we haven't touched on, Roger? Because I want to make sure that we sort of get all the juice out of 40 years of leading a nonprofit, seeing people come from the business world who might want to get into that arena.
I think we've hit on a lot of that. I would say many nonprofits need the business skills that business people have, because they're not running their nonprofit like a business. But just because you have some of those business skills doesn't mean you can run a nonprofit, or you should start. Your first day is the executive director. You have to learn and be humble and really have a passion to help people, though.
Yeah. So one of the things I do want to get back to, you reminded me of a couple things with get involved, volunteer, get involved first. And I was working with another nonprofit here in town a few years ago, and they were struggling with their fundraising. And as we were kind of breaking it down of like why, they actually just weren't telling their story in a very compelling way that resonated with the donor.
Mm-hmm.
Right? It was more features and benefits of here's what we do, but it wasn't resonating with the needs of the donor.
Right.
So we actually recruited some marketers from P&G to come down and help them tell the story better, because that's what brand marketers are experts at. And that was a great way for the P&G people to give back in their gifting and what they were really good at. They didn't have to quit their P&G job to go do that. They dedicated a few hours, which I thought was amazing. And obviously the receiving organization was over the moon with literally world-class help that they were getting. So that's one aspect of it. Given that, this is Career Club and, not a small percentage of our audience might be in job transition, and particularly with layoffs and all that kind of stuff that's happening in the news right now. I'll never forget doing a tour of another facility, nonprofit organization here in town. And, we're looking at all their stuff and it was great. And then off in the corner, I saw some guy pushing a broom. And he looked kind of familiar. I thought, who is that? And I walked back there, and it was a friend of mine that was CMO of a Fortune 500 healthcare company. And that's how he was spending his day, was often the most remote corner of a building you wouldn't have stopped at in 100 years, pushing a broom, because he wanted just to be involved.
Yeah.
And to
That's great.
kind of breathe into another part of his mind and heart, to be a fuller person. And he didn't have to quit his day job to go do that.
Yeah, we have all sorts of opportunities like that. So, we would love people to come, and some people need to use their marketing skills, or they're needed, and some people need to do something different, totally different than their day job. So
yes,
either way is very helpful. And one of the biggest difficulties I have when I'm working with a potential volunteer is figuring out what their passion is. I can tell them what I need, but if it doesn't match their passions and what they need, it doesn't help either of us. So that's the hardest thing, is trying to figure out, okay, should you be pushing a broom, or should you be doing marketing, or should you be working with kids or adults or addicts? It's just, and that's
it's probably like a lot of things in life, whether it's a sport, a music instrument, whatever. Try different things.
Yep, exactly.
And you will find your thing.
Yeah.
But you have to A, get in the game, and then B, try different positions.
Yep.
And if you're really called to it, something will resonate. You don't need to be sold on it. You'll go do it. Which for me, again, is the running to something, because it makes your heart beat a little bit faster.
Yes. Yeah. That's great.
So, Roger, this is great. Again, I want to reiterate, I just have tons of respect for you, the work that you've done. You guys have impacted, thousands and thousands of lives for the good. Again, not just the urban poor that you set out to serve, but the staff that gets to be part of this, the volunteers, the donors. There's a whole ecosystem that supports nonprofits, and everybody benefits from it. And you've played a really key role in our city, and I know even nationally, as a model. So really appreciate you being on with us today. And
thank you.
Wish you well. You're retiring soon, yes?
Oh, hopefully, when they find a replacement. So
Well, that may take a while to fill Roger Howell's shoes. But
thank you. Thanks for your kind words. And just it's all God. I just try to hang out with God and see what He does. So
He's doing a new thing every day. Yes. All right. Well, bless you, Roger. Thank you so much for joining us today. And it was just a real privilege to have you. So thank you.
Thank you. Lord bless you. Appreciate it.
Thank you. Okay. Bye-bye, everyone.